Hey everyone, sorry, I know this episode's late and all, but we've been putting in new floors at my house and the guy doing it was here really late over the weekend, and I had migraines on Thursday night and Friday, and it was just a mess. I just haven't had time to actually upload anything. So this week's episode is going to be a intro to the 7 Hermetic principles and Hermeticism as a whole in general. So one resource I recommend checking out is the Kabbalion by the 3 Initiates. It's free. You can listen to it on YouTube. I think there's recordings of it on Spotify and a few other places. I'll try to link it in the description if I don't actually upload it myself. Hermeticism started in Egypt. It was a philosophy that was made when the Greeks and the Egyptian philosophies kind of merged together. It was supposedly really started by this figure named Hermes Trismegistus, or Thoth Hermes the Thrice Great, or Thoth Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus. He has a lot of different names, but essentially it's just Thoth or Hermes. He separated everything into 7 principles. Not necessarily he wrote out the principles themselves, but they later got released to the general public by the already mentioned 3 Initiates, as well as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and other societies like that. Let's go Theologia, which means ancient theology. The Hermetic philosophy practices what is known as the... It is called this because most people believed that all of the world's religions came from a single source. Some people say that this source was Atlantis or Mu or some sort of other lost civilization that came before the Egyptians and before the Sumerians. Although this cannot be proven, it is highly likely that it all did come from a single source, at least in my opinion. But more on that when I do episodes on Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu, and so on. 7 principles themselves are used to help understand why the world is the way that it is and help you manifest things that you want to happen to you, and to basically learn about yourself through inner reflection and reflection on the outer world at the same time, kind of working hand in hand, so you get a more complete picture of all that is going on. I'm not going to go in depth right now about each of the principles. I'll do separate episodes for each of the different principles. Right now, I'm just going to list off each of them and give a description of each one and what it represents. Before I do this, though, try to understand that the principles don't work one at a time, like say 1, then 2, then 3. It all works together at the same time. They all flow into each other. You can't take one and isolate it by itself. And it's not like alchemy either. It's not going to be, like I said, that sort of going through each process, and you can't even skip around. It just kind of all simultaneously happens, but you need to understand how it happens. This is how the principles or the laws are. They aren't something that's separate. They're all one. All is one and one is all, but you can separate them for the ease of understanding. I really hope that makes sense. I'm sure it probably will as I go on. I never had to explain this to anyone before, and this is really a learning journey for me, just like it is for everyone else who's listening. But yeah, hopefully I explain it well enough, and like I said, when we come back to each of the principles later, it will be more clear on how they work and everything. So the first law is that of mentalism. Mentalism is going to be the thought that perceives the action and the manifestation on the physical. So say that you have an idea to go get a drink because you're hungry. You have the idea of going to get it, which is the law of mentalism. A more advanced idea of this, other than just going to get something as sort of a reaction, which is a correspondent, which is the second principle of something, is that you, as an individual, see something as being bad when somebody else sees it as being good. Say, for example, it's a rainy day and you're just really sad because it's raining and it's like I can't go outside, and someone else is like, well, I like the rain because it's nice, peaceful, it helps me sleep, it helps plants grow, and so on. That's mentalism, because one's seeing it as a positive and one's seeing it as a negative. It's the way that you perceive things. The second law is, or principle really, is that of correspondence. What I found about the law of correspondence I actually really like is what we hold in our thoughts and mind will become our reality. So say that you have a more positive outlook on something, the more positive that thing is going to seem, which is the law of correspondence and mentalism. Mentalism because it's projecting what you think into the physical, and correspondent because it relates to what it is that you're thinking. So it's like connected to your thought, basically. It's influenced by how you see it. When I do the video on correspondence, I'll explain more how it's not just your thoughts that can influence you in your perception of reality, but the perception of others as well. So that will probably be in about 2 or 3 weeks. I'm really planning on making each one of these episodes be bi-weekly, and in between that have something else like zodiac signs or whatever else. But I'll just see where it goes next week on what I do an episode about, because I have several things planned all at once, so I really need to get my ideas together. But today I just decided to do the Hermetic principles because I want to get those out of the way, because they're one of the most, if not the most important thing to understand when it comes to really a lot of this. And it's how I got into a lot of esoteric studies in the first place, is the principles and how they relate to life. The third Hermetic principle is that of vibration. So science tells us that everything vibrates, such as atoms. If you take an atom, or say you take molecules of water, just regular H2O, and you make it vibrate very slowly, you have it in the form of a solid, which would be ice, and then it gets medium, it becomes a liquid, then a gas once it gets to a higher rate of vibration. This shows that the lower vibrations, such as hate, fear, three-dimensional matter, and so on, vibrates at a much denser rate, or not denser rate, but a denser wavelength than that of the higher vibrations. So they're easier to gravitate towards, since we fall towards the heavier vibrations of things. At least that's what I've experienced of people. There are some people that naturally vibrate towards the higher energy wavelengths and all that, but typically it's the more denser wavelengths that people gravitate towards. So say with the example of love and hate, people think that love and hate is the exact opposite of each other, but take a middle standpoint for a second. Say that you meet someone and you become friends, or you engage in some sort of romantic relationship or whatever. Say a guy meets a girl and they like each other, they start dating and everything, and for a while they have a really good relationship, and it's like, I love this person. Then something happens and you get in a huge fight, and so on, and eventually you just start hating the person. That is the opposite end of the spectrum of love, but it's not the exact opposite. If it was the exact opposite, you wouldn't carry the weight, because you're still putting energy towards that person, which is a vibration. So you have both correspondence and vibration right there, because in the middle you have yourself, and then you have vibrations either heavier or lower that you're gravitating towards, and then you have your correspondence, because love and hate are 2 different degrees of the same thing. Kind of like with hot and cold, you can't say where hot begins and where cold begins, because really it's either the increase of heat or the decrease of heat. You can't have cold until absolute zero in Kelvin, which is when matter starts falling apart. And again, you don't have anything, so therefore you can't have a complete opposite of something unless you don't have the thing. And then of course you have mentalism because you're putting energy towards it. I can't remember if I said that, but if I did, I'm sorry. There you go. I'm really trying not to give too overly complex examples right now, because I just want to do a basic intro to each one of the principles. So if I sound like I'm struggling, I really am. I can't explain it very simply with each of the 7 principles all at once. This is like, I'll show how it all relates to each other in the last episode of the series on these principles. But anyway, the 4th of the Hermetic principles is that of polarity. Gosh, I cannot say that word, but it's polarity. Polarity. And if you can't understand what I'm saying, it's Polarity. 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 Gosh, I'm so sorry. That was a mouthful. That was the worst thing I did all day. But anyway, this is when you have 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. Like I was saying with love and hate, it's not the exact opposite. It's different degrees of the same thing. Or something better to understand it with would be hot and cold. Like, to one person, something might be hot, and to another person it might be cold, and vice versa. It's really something that's more, I wouldn't even say personal, but it's not everyone can agree on, if that makes sense. So you can't really say that one begins and the other one ends. Take a magnet, for example. You have the north end and the south end, or the positive and the negative end, one attracting and one repelling, to make that pull so you can have the actual magnet. When you look at it, you just see the magnet though. You see the full thing of what it is, not the individual parts that have the push and pull effect to it. This is going to be kind of what attracts the vibration of the 3rd principle of vibration. So whatever you're talking about when it comes to this part of it, the 4th law or principle is going to be what attracts the 3rd. And the 3rd is how it explains and how it expresses itself. The 6th law is that of cause and effect. This is going to be like, okay, so I throw something up in the air and it comes down because of gravity. The cause is you're throwing something up in the air, and the effect is that it comes back down towards you. And then you can, of course, go on from there and have this sort of chaos theory that you break something and then something else happens, or you don't catch it and then it hits someone in the head or whatever. But you also have the long-term effects. So say that, I know I'm going to use Star Wars as a lot of examples, but a space wizard finds a slave boy and frees him by cheating in a game of chance with 2 dice, and then the Galactic Republic falls and is replaced with an empire for 20 years, which then gets destroyed by that slave child's son. There you go. That is a advanced example of cause and effect. The last law of the 7, or the last principle of the 7, is the law of gender. So this is going to be like you have your male and your female. So say that you have a battery, you have the positive end, and you have the negative end. In occultism, the positive end is going to be the male because it is giving, and the negative is going to be the female because it is receiving. But that's a whole entire another episode in the future when it comes to that principle on its own. So everything in itself has 2 genders, the male and the female. The whole entire goal of this principle is to balance out the male and the female. So say, for example, in magic, you have the male and you have the female. The female is going to be the left-hand path. Well, actually, it's going to be the right-hand path, now I think about it. And the male is going to be the left-hand path. Or, like, say, in Star Wars, for people who don't understand magic terms, you have the Force. You have the light and you have the dark. And in the middle of both of those, you have balance for both magic and the Force analogy. But say in Kabbalah, you have the Tree of Life. On one hand, you have the left-hand path, which is going to be the heavier, darker stuff. It's more egotistical drawn and pushed. And then you have the right-hand path, which is going to be more outward and more... It's basically the divine feminine versus the divine masculine. And in the center of the Tree of Life, you have this pillar that is neutral. This is going to be the divine child, which is going to be the positive and the negative. It's going to be neutral, essentially. If these don't really work, for example, for you, think of an atom. You have the electrons, the protons, and the neutrons. The protons are positive, the neutrons are neutral charge, and the electrons are the negative charge. I could go into an entire episode on the atom and how I see it to a esoteric point of view, but for now, I see the neutron as being that divine child, such as Horus, because it is neutrally charged. The proton is going to be the divine feminine or the mother. So it's going to essentially be Isis, if you think about it in a triad, which I'll get to in a second. And then the electron is going to be the negative charge or the Osiris. And it's even off by itself, so it's going to have that Saturn energy, that watching over the child and the mother, but from a distance sort of energy, which I'll go to when I get into Saturn and the planetary energies. And Osiris, being dead in the underworld pretty much the entire life of Horus and everything. But you have the triad. So you essentially have the law of gender. You have the male, the female, and then you have the balance of the two, which would be the child. Which is ultimately the whole entire goal of what you want to get to, is that supreme balance. I'm sure you can probably tell that this isn't scripted, so I'm still trying to figure out getting that flow sort of thing going on, so I don't keep stuttering or getting my thoughts all mixed up. So I'm still trying to, get used to all this. So thank you for sticking with it and really just letting me figure things out while I'm doing this, because like I said, it's a learning experience for all of this, not just for you guys with the different stuff, but for me too with all the research I've been doing. And of course, so yeah, I think this is about it for this episode of the podcast. I think in my last episode I was gonna have a co-host. It wasn't for this episode, it was gonna be for the episode that's coming up on either Saturday or Sunday. Latest would be Monday. If she has to work Saturday, then it's gonna be Sunday when we get it recorded, so it'd probably be Monday before it's up. But yeah, it's gonna be so much easier when I have a co-host, at least for like a couple episodes every now and then, because it gets really hard to just sit here and have a conversation with yourself. But yeah, this summer I'm hoping to start planting more trees out by my house, because I live out in the woods, but I'm gonna need money for that. So I'm thinking about starting a Patreon, and you get to choose like your own, like the type of tree that you want planted, and I'll figure out something for the different tiers. It just depends. If you don't have to contribute obviously if you don't want to, but really it's just mainly because I want to get money for trees, because I really want to plant some. But other than that, on Saturday, probably Friday actually, I'm planning on doing a live stream on YouTube, so I can answer questions and just talk to people. Basically like what I was going to do for the last one that only 2 people watched. So yeah, the time will probably be about 7 or 8 p.m. But I will let you know on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for sure exactly what it's going to be, like what time it's going to be. And yeah, I think that's the only announcements I have for this episode. So yeah, stay tuned for the next one, and take care, and I will talk to you later. Bye.